Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive into today's top news stories. We'll be covering the economy, some personal finance dilemmas, and even some international happenings. We know that a lot of you are feeling pretty anxious about the stock market right now, and for good reason. MarketWatch is suggesting that this upcoming February jobs report,
Yeah,
the February jobs report,
yeah.
could actually trigger a correction.
Correction is definitely a concern. It seems like investors are getting a little bit jittery
Yeah.
about the overall health of the U.S. economy. We've got fears of recession looming. And this upcoming jobs report could be, well, it might be the tipping point. That confirms all their anxieties.
It's interesting how these broader economic worries that we're talking about, they seem to be mirrored in a lot of the personal financial struggles that people are facing.
Yeah.
MarketWatch featured a story this week about a couple in their 70s who spent a lot of money, on their son's wedding out in L.A. Now they're facing yet another request for some more financial help from him. They feel like an endless honeypot. I think that's something that a lot of parents of adult children can relate to these days.
Yeah, for sure. This story really highlights this growing trend. More and more we're seeing adult children relying on their parents for financial help. And that's a big burden, especially for older generations who are trying to approach retirement.
And then we have a totally contrasting situation, also from MarketWatch. This time it's a family with 9 children. They are dealing with $70,000 in student loan debt, while they're also trying to save for retirement. This story, it just kind of makes you wonder, is this burden of student loan debt contributing to those economic anxieties that we're seeing reflected in the stock market?
Yeah, that's a very valid concern when you have a big chunk of the population who's burdened by this kind of debt. Well, it impacts their spending power, obviously. And it just kind of feeds into all that uncertainty that investors are feeling right now.
Absolutely, and it just kind of shows you how all these things are connected. We also see how individual financial decisions can kind of have these ripple effects within families. MarketWatch also had this story about a 91-year-old man who's thinking about adding a friend to his house deed. I mean, this could cause problems, right? Like what happens with this family?
Yeah, exactly. That situation really highlights the importance of having a good estate plan, to try and avoid any issues when it comes to passing down wealth and to hopefully, avoid any family drama.
Speaking of the housing market, is it actually getting easier to buy a home now? I mean, we are seeing falling mortgage rates. MarketWatch had a really interesting article on that. They actually broke down how much income you would need to afford homes at different price points. It was really eye-opening.
Yeah, I saw that too. It's definitely promising, with the mortgage rates falling. But even so, a lot of people are still priced out, especially in certain markets.
Makes sense. All right, so let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about a pretty surprising twist in the financial landscape. Do you hear about this? Former President Trump announced that he is going to create a U.S. strategic crypto reserve. And this reserve would include Bitcoin, Solana.xrp, and more. CNBC and Investing.com both covered this. This announcement comes right in the middle of all this concern about the Bitcoin route, amplified by these record ETF outflows. MarketWatch even had an article on that. So what's your take on all this?
Well, it's pretty significant. This move could actually signal that the U.S. government is shifting its stance on cryptocurrencies. Maybe they're trying to stabilize the market, or maybe even attract some more of those institutional investors, especially when you think about that concept of faster money that MarketWatch was highlighting.
I see what you're saying. Do you think that this move could be seen as kind of like a safety net for crypto? A way to prevent these rapid outflows that MarketWatch talked about. Could this actually influence global financial stability in any way?
Those are great questions. This is a bold move for sure. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out on the global financial stage.
Definitely something to keep an eye on. We'll have to see if this marks a new era for crypto.
While the U.S. is making these moves in the crypto world, we've also got geopolitical tensions rising. CNBC is reporting that Speaker Johnson is actually suggesting that Zelensky might have to resign, and this comes after a pretty heated Oval Office meeting. So this raises a lot of concerns about the stability of Ukraine's leadership during such a critical time.
So Johnson's statement, it seems to be advocating for a very different approach from Ukraine, right? I mean, is this a push for some kind of negotiated settlement to try and prevent further escalation?
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. His comments, they really reveal these complex power dynamics that are at play right now, and the potential for these shifting alliances as the conflict continues. The pressure on Ukraine to find some sort of resolution is definitely mounting.
It's interesting because CNBC and Investing.com highlighted the UK Prime Minister Starmer's perspective on this, and he's urging Europe to take a more active role in securing peace in Ukraine. So it really emphasizes this delicate balancing act that's involved, supporting Ukraine's sovereignty while also seeking a solution that tries to avoid a wider conflict.
Right. Starmer's call to action really underscores the need for a united front in addressing this crisis. Europe's role in mediating and ensuring stability is becoming more and more crucial.
For sure. And all of these geopolitical tensions that we're talking about, they directly impact the global economy and definitely contribute to this stock market volatility that we've been seeing. Uncertainty breeds caution among investors, and the ripple effects are felt worldwide.
Absolutely. Geopolitical events and economic trends, they're totally linked. This interconnectedness, it's evident in how these international developments influence investor confidence and overall market behavior.
Speaking of interconnectedness, CNBC is reporting that China's Honor is pledging $10 billion for AI investment, and they're also deepening their ties with Google. So how does this move fit into this broader picture of global technological competition?
Well, this development, it really highlights the ongoing race for AI dominance. China's commitment to advancing their AI capabilities signifies a potential shift in the balance of technological power, and it definitely challenges the U.S.'s position in this field.
So this technological competition, it just adds another layer of complexity to this already intricate landscape of global affairs. What are your thoughts on the potential implications of this growing rivalry between the U.S. and China?
I think the competition between the U.S. and China when it comes to AI, it's going to have far-reaching consequences. It'll influence innovation, economic growth, and even global power dynamics.
It's fascinating how even seemingly unrelated news stories can offer these insights into broader trends. Like, did you see this article in CNBC about how new airplane deliveries are being delayed because of these increasingly luxurious first-class seats?
Yeah, I saw that. It's pretty wild, right? It's
Yeah.
just a small example, but I think it points to this larger issue, this growing disparity between the haves and the have-nots, and it really echoes those financial struggles that ordinary families are facing, those personal finance stories that we talked about earlier.
And while some people are enjoying these over-the-top luxury experiences, others are facing some pretty stark realities when it comes to our dependence on technology. CNBC reported on this recent Microsoft outage. It was disrupting email and other apps, and it really underscores how vulnerable our digital infrastructure can be these days.
Yeah, it's a wake-up call for sure. It shows how much we rely on technology. I mean, one little glitch can totally disrupt communication, productivity, even essential services. And it affects individuals and businesses all over the world. I think it highlights the need for better backup systems and contingency plans, so we can minimize the impact of these kinds of events in the future.
It seems like there are vulnerabilities everywhere you look.
Yeah.
CNBC also reported on a former Social Security head who's warning about potential interruptions to benefits because of these recent changes at the agency. And this is really concerning for a lot of people who rely on these benefits.
Absolutely. It just goes to show how important these social safety nets really are. And we have to think about the consequences when policies change. We need to make sure those changes aren't harming vulnerable populations. And, transparency is so important. People need to understand what's happening so they can trust these programs.
Speaking of potential vulnerabilities, CNBC had this story about Citigroup. They mistakenly credited a customer with $81 trillion. Can you believe that? It's crazy. I mean, it makes you wonder about the safeguards that are in place and how these institutions manage risk.
It's almost funny when you think about it, but it shows how these systemic errors can happen. And even if they fix it quickly, it still kind of erodes trust in these institutions. Human error is always going to be a factor, so we need systems that minimize the risk of these huge mistakes.
All right, so from trillions of dollars, let's shift to political aspirations. CNBC is reporting that former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, well, he's thinking about running for NYC mayor. And Investing.com shared some news about the Pope's improving health. He's recovering from that respiratory crisis. These stories, they just remind us that the world keeps on turning. There's always political maneuvering and health concerns impacting these influential figures.
Definitely those developments have implications, both locally and globally. Cuomo getting back into politics could really change things in New York City. And the Pope's health is important to millions of people. It just highlights that everything is connected.
All right, let's end our deep dive on a positive note. CNBC reported on the successful moon landing of that private lunar lander, Blue Ghost. It was carrying experiments for NASA. It's really exciting to see these private companies playing a bigger role in space exploration.
I agree it's a new era. It's all about innovation and pushing the boundaries of what we know.
So today we've covered a lot of ground. We talked about economic anxieties, personal finance struggles, global power dynamics, even space exploration. And we've seen how all these seemingly separate events are connected. It's a lot to take in. But staying informed is so important these days.
It really is. When we connect the dots and see the bigger picture, we can understand the forces that are shaping our world, and that helps us make better decisions and engage in more meaningful discussions.
Exactly. So keep those eyes on the news and stay curious. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.